There's someone called Hella. She's not coming today, is she?
No,
Hella?
I think she's joining online.
Oh, she's
I'm not sure.
online.
She
Oh.
said see you in like Anführungszeichen.
Yeah, probably that's what I saw. Okay. Okay. So let's start with the prayers, as usual. Okay. Until I reach enlightenment, I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By accumulating merit and wisdom through generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Until I reach enlightenment, I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By accumulating merit and wisdom through generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Until I reach enlightenment, I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By accumulating merit and wisdom through generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment and anger that holds some close and others distant. I pay homage to the Sublime Mother of the victorious ones of the three times, the inexpressible, inconceivable, and indescribable perfection of wisdom, which is unborn, unceasing, and of the nature of space, and which is the object of realization of the self-knowing primordial wisdom. Okay, great. So let's start with your homework. Remember your homework? We have two sayings. One saying by Shantideva in his Bodhisattva Charitara, or Bodhisattva Way of Life, saying there's nothing that doesn't become easier through familiarity. So through familiarity, there's nothing that doesn't get easier. And then there was Nev's, by your mom, the one by your mom, that she kept hearing growing up. So it says, familiarity breeds contempt. Familiarity basically gives rise to contempt, or may give rise, or gives rise to contempt. So are these two, aren't they contradictory? They're not contradictory? Okay. Why not? Why are they not? What do we mean with familiarity? I think the word familiarity is so important in Buddhism. That's why I really like that saying, because it seems contradictory, doesn't it? I mean, familiarity, there's just another word for meditation. The Tibetan word for meditation means to familiarize. But of course, in a positive way, of course, obviously. So anyway, familiarity, habituation, very, very important concept. Now, anyone would like to volunteer why there are not these two sayings, these two phrases are not contradictory?
I think the reference is different.
Pardon?
Familiarity breeds contempt is generally said with respect to people. And
Okay.
here he's talking about the text.
Okay, so you're saying that familiarity breeds contempt refers to the relationship we have with people. Whereas here we're not talking about people, we're talking about the text, or we're talking about Buddhist concepts, right? But you could argue, what about relationships with people? We don't know someone, a colleague, for example. So initially it's difficult, we don't know them well enough. But through familiarity with that person, it becomes easier to work with them. You could also apply it to that. Though that is not the main reason why Shantideva, or Acharya Shantideva says so. But still, I would say it's okay. On the other hand, I would say familiarity breeds contempt can also be used if you do something over and over, and at some point you're like so tired of it, right? You do it again and again, and then you go, isn't that what it means with other people? You're with them the whole time, and then at some point you can't bear the sight of them.
Yeah, maybe familiarity also because you get to know them better, so you also get to know the sides you don't like, and then
Right, so familiarity, you get the good and the bad sides.
maybe that's what you focus on after years. It stands out like this certain character trait, it's annoying me.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay, so
I'm familiar with that.
the first one focuses more on the positive sides, the second one more on the negative sides.
No, both. I mean, familiarity, it's becoming familiar with everything.
Right, in both cases, it's a kind of a repeated exposure,
Yeah.
you could say, right? In both cases. Sorry, I need to switch this.
Maybe also
Like this.
boredom, like you get bored.
You get bored of the other person, okay. So Bernd is saying, isn't this a matter of motivation? Is this all a matter of motivation? Okay, all right, could be a matter of motivation. Okay, there's something to it. But maybe I give you one, that's just how I look at it. Give you a slight hint. In Buddhism, when we talk about emotions, for instance, emotions are huge. Would you agree? Emotions. So emotions are always a problem when they're extreme. Extreme. So this whole idea of extreme this, that, excessive this, that, implied by that term, right? There's something that is not exactly in accordance with reality. So emotions such as anger, emotions such as attachment, they exaggerate the negativity in the case of aversion. They exaggerate the positive qualities. So now thinking of that this extremity or this excessiveness, how would you apply this to the two types of familiarity? Anyone?
Is it like the second one is more like the attachment to the outcome, and that being like the familiar mindset breeds contempt in the mind, and then with the first one it's like there's less of it's more you're attached, like you're more interested in the process. I don't know, just kind of.
All right, so Nev, I'm saying it right? Neve is saying, Neve is, I know someone who's called Nev, that's one right. So Neve, she's saying, well, what about the second one? Attachment is involved, like you're with that person, you're attached to them, and that may play into it, which is why then it may lead to contempt, right? Okay, all right. But then you could argue, well, what about we attach to Buddhism, you attach to the texts? I mean, we just transfer our attachment, whereas previously it was attached to one thing, now it's attached to, right? It's just a matter of transfer. But yeah, all right. Still, there's something to it, something to think about. Anyone else? Talking about extreme, yes?
So I think it takes a while to agree that the peace of mind and the happiness of mind is not connected to either extreme.
It takes a while to understand that peace of mind is free from the two extremes. Usually they're two extremes.
Because we are so familiarized with the fact that something that is very very exciting is big, is flashy, extra, super, and we go like this. So then when we get familiar with doing the same thing, the routine, the same places, the same people.
Right.
We might misunderstand that this is boring. This is not enough. I want more. But it's this familiarization and finding the peace in this.
So she made an interesting point. I'll repeat what you said. Sorry, I forgot to repeat earlier what Neve said. Hopefully became clear from the context for those listening online. But what you were saying was, well, we're so used to kind of falling into extremes, and we're also used to being entertained, basically, flashy, like again and again, new stuff. And so the second type of familiarity seems like you're like, you're getting bored of that. Like there's nothing new to it, there's nothing exciting about it any longer, and that's where contempt comes in. That's basically how I thought of it. It's just slightly in a slightly different way. So the second one reminds me of like an overexposure. Like you've been too much. I mean, this is true for everything. We need to find the appreciation in something, the novelty in it. Has anyone, well, you probably all heard this, beginner's mind. Generate a beginner's mind when you meditate, as if it was for the first time, when you sit down to do your practice. Because we may actually experience that in our practice as well. Usually you do a repetitive kind of practice. If, for instance, you have set commitments you need to follow. So oftentimes, like, you know, you want to be excited, you want to maybe do something new, you have to recite it over and over again, and we sometimes lose kind of our attentive, because we've done it so many times, we don't really pay attention to the words, and it becomes like a, you get bored with it. Yeah, exactly. So here, familiarity is kind of like, you don't see it with the beginner's mind. There's no, like every time actually it should be new, because you're new. You're different. You've had a different experience throughout the day. So let's say you take your own practice at night, for instance. So throughout the day, new things happened. There's new situations that have arisen, new challenges in terms of our afflictions. Maybe something that has never arisen before. Or actually, if we pay more attention, it becomes clear that every day is totally new. We focus more on what is the same. But no single day is ever the same. Every single day is different. And we've moved on, we've changed. Yeah, we see certain behavioral patterns that repeat themselves. But really, when we focus more on the details, they're slightly different. So actually, our practice should be new every day, because our mind is different, the situations are different, and we can make it more exciting. The second type is this kind of, yes, excessive familiarity, no longer appreciating what's new, focusing on what is the same. We get bored, wary, indifferent, and even feel contempt. And I thought it was so beautiful she brought it up, because that in itself is kind of a lesson. Make sure this familiarity that we are talking about in the context of Acharya Chantideva's text is the one that leads to more skills, that allows us to grow, because we do see the difference, we appreciate it. We pretend every day I do it anew. This is like I'm doing it for the first time. How does this help my mind today? For instance, when we visualize the Buddha, like we've done it so many times, it's like the Buddha, but like bringing excitement in there. Oh, it's the Buddha himself right in front of me. Seeing me for who I am and being there, my refuge. I had a hard day today. I had this issue, that issue, and there he is, right there, ready to help me, for instance. We have to make it exciting. And so it's kind of a familiarity on one hand. It gets better, we get better and better at it, to see it with a beginner's mind. But nothing of the novelty, the appreciation gets lost. Does that make sense or not? Does that make sense? I mean, it seems to be contradictory. You try to bring in something new, but you familiarize yourself with appreciating what's there. I mean, what I'm also thinking of, it's true with other people. Sometimes we lose our respect. I was thinking about that as well. Like when we are with other people we are really close to, friends or family, we lose our respect for them. We're too close. We're so sure of their love and their affection for us that we lose the respect. I mean, it's kind of like losing our respect. So they're not going to hate us. So whenever things go wrong, we could just kind of, what's the word for it? Let them, get it all out on them. Yeah, and become more familiar with that in this way. And we have this huge disadvantage in the 21st century, unfortunately, that we're this entertainment society. So in that way, we get pretty quickly bored. Buddhist practice is all about repetition, and it's not that much exciting. So we have to bring in excitement. Yeah. All right. Anyway, that was your homework.
Is there a reason why he says in particular it makes it easier when it's familiar? Like,
Why? Okay. Why does Acharya Chandrakirti say, why does he emphasize it gets easier? What do you think? Yes, that's an important question. Why? He's not saying makes it more exciting. No, doesn't say that. So, yes.
Yeah. For example, when you look at anger and you do this repetitive, you do it many times. So the anger is getting lower, so it becomes more acceptable, and you can get some.
Okay, let me repeat what I think you've said. So when you apply the antidotes to anger, for instance.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, it's like, this is not working. I'm still getting angry. All these methods, these techniques they're introducing to us, it's not working. It feels like my mind is much more powerful than the antidotes that I'm trying to apply. So it's frustrating. However, after some time, when you do it again and again, you feel, oh, this is actually working. So to encourage us, it gets easier with time. The same is true, for instance, when our practice seems so boring. But when you do it again and again, and you do it with the right kind of attentiveness, like you see, when they say, do your practice like with a beginner's mind. What is it about a beginner's mind? You're very attentive. You're much more focused. You do it like if the first time you pay extra attention, everything is done very thoroughly. And when you do something thoroughly, you enjoy doing it, right? When you do it with all your attention, you don't think of anything else. You're just in that moment. You're just doing it. And if the emotions arise, there's faith, there's love. There are all these positive emotions that make us feel good. Then our practice is very rewarding. Whereas in the first case, it's kind of like, just say it again and again. And maybe the first time we had these emotions, and the second times we did too, but then it gets lost. So here, it's all about making it easier in that excitement that we felt the first time. Being moved, being emotionally, having emotions arise in our continuum, because they should be there. Our whole practice should be connected to positive emotions. You visualize the Buddha in front of you. Appreciation. How kind that the Buddha came and taught and did what the Buddha did. So I've got now all the techniques, everything I need to become enlightened. And not just that, everything to cope with everyday life. However difficult it may be, but there's the solution. Number one. Number two, then, you take refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. All right, so from now on, I try to find the solution in the Dharma. I can still, when things go wrong, have a bar of chocolate or, binge on watching movies. That's okay. But also see what the Buddha has to offer, what the Dharma has to offer in terms of solutions. So again, taking refuge. Then generating bodhicitta, taking a moment, love and compassion for all sentient beings, try to generate that. So all these emotions, these positive emotions, are part of this practice. Yeah? And through familiarity, if you do this again and again, you allow for these emotions. Every time you make a point until the emotion arises. Don't go on to just read it. No, okay, it's the emotion there, and then with that emotion you do your practice, it becomes so rewarding and it becomes easier. So you don't fall into the trap of like, gosh, again, when is this over kind of thing. But rather it becomes easier and it becomes more enjoyable because these emotions grow stronger. Does that make sense? Buddhist practice, it's about familiarity, but familiarity with positive emotions. Now, when we practice analytical meditation, for instance, we sometimes believe that analytical meditation, all it is analyze, 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 and be done. Start with some breathing meditation, but then once we've done that, we've completed that, the mind is focused, we start analyzing, and once we've done so for half an hour, we can get up and leave. No, that is not going to it's not going to cause your mind to profoundly change. Because our actions are controlled by emotions, not by our intellectual understanding of things, right? Only when that intellectual understanding kind of goes more to it, or this intellectual understanding is internalized further so that it moves us emotionally, only then do our actions change. For instance, a simple example, we get upset with someone. We were totally happy and satisfied, we're doing our thing, and then someone insulted us. And right away we start thinking, what did they just say? They said this to me. And initially there's just a reflection, there's no emotional response, but sooner or later we get upset. And we think more about it, and then we get more upset, which leads to anger. If we didn't get upset, we wouldn't get angry. Impossible. If we were just as peaceful and happy the whole time through, even though we were insulted, we couldn't get angry. That feeling of unhappiness, of frustration, I don't know, what does it feel like? How would you put it into words when we get insulted? How does it feels bad, it feels disappointing, it feels, I can't even put it into words, miserable, and so forth. Yeah, so all these emotions then give rise to anger. Okay? Therefore, here we're doing the opposite. We're applying a reflection. Again, when you get angry, you reflect. However, I don't know how logical your reflection is. I mean, probably our reflections are not very logical. Mine certainly isn't. So, and that gives rise to a negative emotion. Those two work well with each other. Illogical, kind of irrational kind of logic, and then giving rise to I did so much to them, why don't they say the same stuff to this person? Why would they, I want the other person to be insulted, but don't think I deserve it, and so forth. Anyway, it's not very, very rational, and eventually it gives rise to anger. Now we do the opposite. We reflect, and generate a positive emotion. Don't get up. Don't get up from your meditation cushion without triggering a positive kind of emotion. But what is that emotion? That's a little difficult. Sometimes with love and compassion, it's easy. You meditate on love and compassion. What is the positive emotion? Love and compassion, right? But then when you meditate on impermanence, for instance, so everything is changing. So it's almost like you're in awe. Like, oh my gosh, everything is changing. I'm still holding on to. So you're in touch with your own holding on to permanence, wishing for things to be the same, for instance, holding on to your relationships being the same, expecting them to be the same. But then through your meditation on impermanence, for instance, to take exactly that situation when you ordinarily hold on to permanence and come to the conclusion, that doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that I hold a grudge. Because someone holding a grudge, wird nachtragend sein. Nachtragend sein. So to still have like aversion towards someone who's done something last week, that person has changed, the situation has changed, I have changed, but it feels like that's still the same guy. That's the guy who, insulted me. But if you think about impermanence, it doesn't make any sense. It's long gone. Guilt is a classical example. I am my mistake. Right? Oh, I've done something wrong. Oh my God, I'm so bad. Last year, I made this huge mistake. I am so bad. I'm this person who made the mistake. That is a simple case of not understanding I'm no longer that person. I have regret. I wouldn't do it again if I could help it. So just let it go. Because impermanence means it's gone, it's done. If you feel like a victim, all right, something terrible happened to you, and so you feel like you're still that victim, you're no longer that victim. You were a victim, but now you're someone else. So all this has to do with not fully understanding impermanence. So impermanence is so profound, and we really need to think about it. And then it moves us emotionally in such a way that we understand, for instance, our guilt doesn't make any sense. Guilt is so terrible. Tibetans don't suffer from guilt. They don't feel guilty. They have remorse. That is a healthy kind of reaction. Okay, that was not okay. I'm sorry for that. If I have the opportunity to apologize, I'll do that. But, next time I'll do it better. That's it. You see these emotions like guilt, hating ourselves. Someone put this comment in there, very, very, very important. Anya, someone called Anya. She said, when we talk about love and compassion, as we've been talking about, are you Anya? Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay. Yes, I didn't know. Oh, I forgot. Yeah, so Anya put this in the group. She said, to understand that we're also human and that we're also worthy of love and compassion. Because in the West, this is something Tibetans really don't know, self-hatred and self-contempt, they don't suffer from that. They don't really know what that means. Well, slowly they'll get to know it living the modern life, but at this point, traditionally they don't. So it starts with ourselves. Okay, I've made mistakes, but okay, everyone makes mistakes. I have a lot of positive sides. I have a lot of positive qualities I have Buddha nature. I love what Aidan said last time. That was so beautiful. When he said the emphasis on Buddha nature in some traditions, it's helpful to look at how it's emphasized in other traditions, much more the emphasis on being Buddhas, having everything to become a Buddha already. It's all already there, basically. So then we can love ourselves much better. We can forgive ourselves our own mistakes, and of course, also have more love and compassion for others, and not be frustrated by their suffering, because we know, well, it's just at the surface, and we will be able to overcome it. Okay, anyway. That's enough for the homework. That was a bit of a longer. All right. But just to discuss, so briefly talk about what we said last time. So last time we spoke about the qualities of a bodhisattva in terms of bodhicitta, great compassion, in particular conventional bodhicitta. So the wish to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. On this ground, on the first ground, that is a reason why bodhisattvas on this ground surpass hearers and solitary realizers, those on the foundational path, those on the path to self-liberation. Okay, and then we had these quotes from the sutra called Liberating Story of Maitreya Sutra. In this way here also, Lama Tsongkhapa quotes this sutra saying, Acharya Chandrakirti didn't make it up. This comes from the Buddha himself, giving that comparison between a prince and these ministers and these greatly educated kind of senior employees of a court, for instance. So take a court. Like a king and all the people working for the king. They may be so educated, so sophisticated, and still the prince is seen as superior to them in terms of their lineage. So here, even the bodhisattva at the very beginning, even if they're a bodhisattva, let's say, on the path of seeing, which is still pretty much at the beginning in comparison to what is to come. So these bodhisattvas, if you compare them to Hira Arhats, bodhisattvas on the first ground are not liberated yet. They still have afflictions. A lot of innate afflictions are still there. So a bodhisattva on the first ground still has all the afflictions except the acquired ones. They're gone once they're on the first ground, once they've entered the meditative equipoise. But the innate ones are still there. Now, in comparison to a hira, a solitary realizer, arhat, you would say, well, the arhat is so much more developed, has so much more understanding and they're more understanding in the sense that at least their ignorance is totally gone. And still, here it says that the bodhisattva still surpasses the hira and solitary realizer in terms of their conventional bodhicitta. Like a prince is still seen as superior to, a king's ministers, etc. Then we had the example of the Garuda. Even a Garuda, like this special bird, even a Garuda chick is still, in terms of their potential strength and so forth, superior to all mature birds. All right, so these are all the examples. It seems like a lot of explanation for something that you understand in 2 sentences, but that was the teaching style at the time of the Buddha, right? Giving all these different analogies, these different examples. So, all right. Anyway, then let's go to page 128. Oh, someone also remarked, or someone said in the groups, it would be good to have the page numbers. Maybe that could be done at the very end. I'll try to remember that we start today on page 128 and then we'll continue, well, ideally for about 5 pages, but let's see. If it's too much material, I won't go into too many details. So here it says, although explanation of the commentary, Lama Tsongkhapa says, explanation of the commentary. This is a particular text. This is the only Indian text or only Indian commentary that Lama Tsongkhapa refers to all the time by Acharya Chandakirti. Now, Entering the Middle Way, of course, is the text we're studying by an Indian Mananda master. But the commentaries we use are all from Tibetan masters. The only commentary Lama Tsongkhapa relies on is Acharya Jayanananda's commentary. It was mentioned before. He was a great Indian master who actually is said to have traveled to Tibet. And his commentary, Lama Tsongkhapa uses a lot. In one of the footnotes, I've given you a little bit more information about this master. So if you just use the search function Acharya Jayanananda or Jayanananda, if you just copy paste it, you'll find the footnote. So he composed this text, Explanation of the Commentary, and in there he interprets the meaning of these 2 citations from the sutra in terms of what is called verbally derived awakening mind. So in other words, he says here the Buddha is not talking about bodhicitta in the continuum of a first ground bodhisattva, but he mentions a particular type of bodhicitta, which is called verbally derived bodhicitta. I don't think you've heard about this before. This is not mentioned a lot, but for us, actually quite important. Anyway, let's look at it. Just through his assertion, we are introduced to this particular concept. So the verbally derived awakening mind, or the verbally derived bodhicitta. He says that therefore the phrases in the sutra, on the beginner's stage and having generated the mind not long ago, are to be understood in terms of verbally. He says like they're understood in terms of verbally derived awakening mind, while the phrases that I just went through are to be understood in terms of ultimate awakening mind. For instance, it was mentioned above that birth in the lineage of the Tathagatas is from the first ground. In these 2 sutra citations, apart from the 2 distinct metaphors, their reference is the same. So here now Lama Tsongkhapa is talking. It's not that clear. It's a little bit difficult to understand. That's why you have the explanation beneath. Furthermore, the meaning of these 3 lines of the root text appears to summarize the content of that cited sutra. As for the awakening mind of pure altruistic intention, many sources, including the ornament of the Mahayana Sutras, describes this as the awakening mind of the first ground. Yeah, it's a little hard to understand. Okay, now comes the explanation. So, in his text, Explanation of the Commentary, this Indian Nalanda master or Indian master Acharya Jayanananda explains that the phrases on the beginner stage and having generated the mind not long ago, which were part of the sutra cited above, so Liberating the Story of Maitreya Sutra, they refer only to the verbally derived awakening mind. Dale Jungwe Semkye. This is a literal translation, so verbally derived awakening mind. What is this verbally derived awakening mind? It is a kind of simulated or imitative bodhicitta. A simulated or imitative bodhicitta, a mind that recognizes the value of awakening and deliberately formulates the thought, I will attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Sound familiar? That's our bodhicitta. verbally derived. So it's not like we really feel it from the depth of our heart. In the beginning, it's kind of like we say the words and we, like through the accumulation of merit and by the accumulation of merit and wisdom through generosity, the other perfections may become kind of like we say the words and have a sense, okay, now I've got bodhicitta. We maybe think for a moment, but it's not like I'm saying the words because I have this deep aspiration to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. Remember, we spoke about contrived bodhicitta and uncontrived bodhicitta, right? Contrived is kind of a little artificial. Contrived basically means artificial. Uncontrived means not artificial. It means the actual mind of enlightenment, the actual mind of enlightenment or awakening mind or bodhicitta, whatever you want to call it. So that bodhicitta that arises spontaneously, it just keeps popping up, comes spontaneous. So right now, it doesn't come spontaneous. We really have to familiarize with it. I guess a bodhisattva also still has to familiarize with that mind, but only to strengthen it further. However, they have generated this mind in such a way that it pops up automatically all the time, and all their actions are informed by this mind. Right now, all our actions are informed by self-centeredness. What's best for me in this lifetime, right? Short term. In this lifetime, what do I want to achieve? What is good for me? And so on. So it's not all sentient beings, let's face it. Our main focus is not all sentient beings. For a bodhisattva, uncontrived bodhicitta means all their actions are now spontaneously at all times, whatever they do. They have coffee in the morning, for instance. They may still have coffee, of course, or tea or whatever is their preference, thinking, may I awake? So, I'm fit, I'm strong, I'm ready to be there for all sentient beings. So everything is mainly for the benefit of all sentient beings. It's really like everything right now is for me, and that I is exchanged for all sentient beings. That's the difference. That's the difference between someone like me, who's got the self-centered mind is at the forefront, as opposed to someone who has great compassion. When you have great compassion, that switches already. But then based on that great compassion, so it's this wish, I want to do everything I can for the benefit of other sentient beings. What is the best solution? Buddhahood, that's the best place or the best kind of state I could attain in order then to be most effectively working for the benefit of all sentient beings. So in other words, if you have bodhicitta, that must have been preceded by great compassion. If you have great compassion, then your focus is totally on others. Having said that, before you get there, you have the contrived version of bodhicitta, where it's not that spontaneous. But so contrived, there must be so many different levels. Just before uncontrived bodhicitta arises, you just have to remind yourself every now and then your focus is on others. And your focus is on, focus is not just on others, but your focus is on enlightenment, your own enlightenment for the benefit of all others. So it needs just a little bit of like a push. But then that is preceded by a little bit more of a push, a little bit more of an effort, all the way to when it's really not there. It's only when we think about, when we take refuge or when we do the prayer of refuge and bodhicitta, or in the morning, or if we listen to His Holiness's teachings and His Holiness teaches, and we go, oh yeah, right? That's why it's good to watch some of the videos maybe online, to be moved by someone like His Holiness, to then have that mind. But it's far from spontaneous. You could say it's a contrived version. It's debatable. But anyway, the verbally derived awakening mind is the one we have right now, I guess, if at all. Would you agree? Yeah, so through through words, like just reciting the words, thinking them in our mind. I mean, we don't have to verbally say them, but thinking them in our mind, then, oh yeah, there was something. Oh yeah, bodhicitta, right? And it's through the words that it comes back, yeah. So this denotes a kind of simulated or imitative bodhicitta, a mind that recognizes the value of awakening and deliberately formulates the thought, I will attain Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. Yet it arises merely on the level of intellectual construction or verbal formulation, rather than as a deep, heartfelt, spontaneous intention, right? That would be like that this deep, heartfelt, spontaneous intention would already be uncontrived bodhicitta. So it doesn't really say anywhere. This is not mentioned much, but when I came across that, I thought, wow, this is beautiful. This is really nice way of putting into words what we are experiencing definitely at the beginning. So Lama Tsongkhapa, however, disagrees with Acharya Jayanananda's interpretation. He doesn't disagree with there being verbally derived awakening mind, but he disagrees with Acharya Jayanananda's interpretation when he says these quotes from the sutra on the beginner stage, who has generated awakening mind not too long ago, that refers to this verbally derived awakening mind. He says, no, that's not what this means. Lama Tsongkhapa explains that the expressions beginner stage and mind not long ago generated do not refer merely to the simulated form of bodhicitta, but to the ultimate awakening mind attained on the first ground. Right? To the mind on that first ground, that ultimate, is it really the ultimate awakening mind? Yeah, that's what it says, the ultimate awakening mind. In other words, the sutra passage is not speaking of practitioners who have only developed an intellectual or verbal aspiration for enlightenment, but of bodhisattvas who have entered the lineage of the Tathagatas, who have reached the first ground through a direct realization of emptiness, sustained by great compassion and bodhicitta on the path of seeing. That's the awakening mind. Both are referred to as awakening mind, ultimate awakening mind, conventional awakening mind. And that is seen as in the beginning because of the 8 grounds, it's the first ground. Bodhicitta on the path of seeing. This birth into the lineage of the Buddhas, which is attained on the path of seeing, beginning as mentioned above from the first ground onward, as indicated in the first line of verse 6. Okay. It should also be noted that although the two metaphors, the newly born prince and the newly hatched Garuda, differ in imagery, they convey the same point. Bodhisattvas on the first ground, by virtue of their bodhicitta and great compassion, surpass hearers and solitary realizers. So although here the awakening mind is the ultimate awakening mind, the direct realization of emptiness, but they surpass hearers and solitary realizers from the point of view of their conventional awakening mind. Does that make sense? Okay. The first 3 lines of verse 8 succinctly express this idea and appear to summarize the content of the 2 sutra citations. Okay. All right. So, moreover, the awakening mind cited in the second quotation from the liberating story of Maitreya, the powerful wings, so the Garuda analogy, I just gave that quote again, describes the awakening mind of pure altruistic intention. All right, so here awakening mind can be a little bit confusing. Sometimes it refers to the ultimate awakening mind, sometimes to the conventional awakening mind. Here Lama Tsongkhapa is just summarizing what some of the masters of the past have told us. But yes, there's definitely this consent that this quote that is given here, right here, about the powerful wings and so forth, that is the awakening mind of pure altruistic intention. Now, if you study, for instance, one of the subjects that we studied traditionally in the Geshe studies or traditionally in Tibet, there's a text called, there's a text actually by Maitreya, by the Reverend Maitreya. It's called Ornament of Clear Realizations. It's a text we all study even before we study this text. We studied this for about 6 years. And we learned a lot about the different path. So we learn about bodhicitta, a lot about bodhicitta, for instance. And in one part of bodhicitta, or as one section in the text, explains, it talks about different types of bodhicitta from the point of view of where you are on the path of accumulation, on the path of preparation, the path of accumulation, preparation, path of seeing, and so forth. So usually we just say bodhicitta, 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 bodhicitta. But actually the mind grows stronger. The mind of bodhicitta is ever stronger. The bodhicitta on the path of accumulation is not as strong as the bodhicitta on the path of seeing. Does that make sense? That it increases because your wisdom increases and you familiarize with it further. Okay, so this is information that, it's considered to be really important, that we do not think once you have bodhicitta, you're done with it. Okay, now you have bodhicitta, put it aside, focus on something else, on wisdom and what have you. No, you need to always go back. Everything. That's what I'm saying. What we do right now is basically the same as bodhisattvas do, going over it again and again and again. The difference is we haven't achieved that mind. We have merely the verbally derived bodhicitta, if at all. And then we keep we go over it and over it, and we keep strengthening that, and that becomes stronger and stronger, and until it becomes fully fledged, contrived bodhicitta, stronger and stronger, until, right? So the bodhisattva has already uncontrived bodhicitta, that spontaneous intention or spontaneous mind, but they still need to do the same that we do. Basically, therefore, our practices can be very similar, except the mind they're actually enhancing here is quite different in their case. Okay. But they may use the same meditation, the same reasoning, the same reflections. All sentient beings have been our mothers at some point. All sentient beings are equal to myself, equalizing and exchanging self with others, and so on. So there's not that much new stuff coming, right? A new kind of meditation that bodhisattvas on the path of seeing do. It's that same meditation. So if you get bored, it's not just now that you're doing the same meditations in the future. So now it's up to us to bring excitement into our practice, because if we don't do it now, we won't bring it in any time later. Okay. Anyway, going back to this. So the second quotation describes the awakening mind of pure altruistic intention. According to authoritative sources, such as Reverend Maitreya's Ornament of the Mahayana Sutras. This is not the text I talked about. This is another text by the same author, also Reverend Maitreya, right? Maitreya, someone called Maitreya. So in this text, actually, he talks about what's called the awakening mind of pure altruistic intention, which refers to conventional bodhicitta newly attained on the first ground. So, bodhicitta on the first ground is actually called bodhicitta of pure altruistic intention. Therefore, the liberating story of Maitreya Sutra cannot, as Acharya Jayananda asserts, be referring to a merely intellectual, verbally derived intention to attain enlightenment, but is describing the ultimate awakening mind on the first ground that marks genuine entry into the lineage of the Tathagatas. So, just to summarize, Acharya Jayananda in his commentary says, in the sutras, this bodhicitta, they're talking about that new mind refers to the verbally derived, that bodhicitta we develop in the very beginning. And Lama Tsongkhapa says, no. As Maitreya's Ornament of the Mahayana Sutras talks about the awakening mind of pure altruistic intention, that's the one mentioned here. And that is the one you have on the first ground. Okay, that's the source for that. Okay. Yes, please?
But then the bodhicitta that Jayananda is talking about is the one that will get you to the path of, what's the first path?
Path of accumulation?
Accumulation.
Yes,
No?
that's true.
Not to the first bhumi.
No, exactly.
So to the first path.
Yes. So the one that Acharya Jayananda is talking about, he's thinking the sutras are talking about the total beginner. Like when we start practicing the Mahayana, when we start practicing the universal vehicle, right? In the very beginning, we're told for the first time, generate bodhicitta. And even now, if we don't do our practice effectively, even after years, our bodhicitta is verbally derived. It's not even actual bodhicitta, to be honest. It's verbally derived, as in like, we only generate that mind if we have the thought, if we verbally repeat it in our mind, or if we read the prayer. That is the verbally derived type. It's the more intellectually derived type that we don't feel deep with it, right? Maybe we have a few moments when His Holiness inspires us. They say when you're in the presence of a great Lama, then it arises. But that is only leading us towards the Bodhisattva path. You only have it when you're not on the path. Does that make sense? So that's how he interprets it. And Lama Tsongkhapa is saying, no, it's not that beginners. We're talking about here when it says in the beginning, he's talking about the first ground. That is the beginning here. Not a beginning from our perspective, but a beginning from the point of view of the first to the 10th ground. Right? This is what's a little confusing. Acharya Chandrakirti doesn't start from the very beginning. He starts with the first ground. And he talks about the first to the 7th ground. First to the 10th ground, sorry. The 10 chapters in this text. Acharya Chandrakirti's text has how many chapters? 10, actually 11, sorry. 11. But the 11th is the result. The first chapter deals with the first ground. Mainly with generosity. We'll get to this, generosity. The second ground deals with moral conduct or moral discipline. That's the second ground. That's the second chapter. And then the 6th chapter is wisdom. That is the most extensive one. It's all about emptiness and so forth. But here the point is that, yes, there's some misinterpretation. And Lama Tsongkhapa basically says, no, we're talking about the first ground bodhicitta. So to elaborate on the awakening mind of pure altruistic intention. Okay, what are we talking about here? What kind of mind is that? Reverend Maitreya presents a system that explains the awakening mind in terms of its development. Right? So just as a side note, I mentioned this type of mind, it's mentioned here. I'm explaining it here simply because we studied this before. When we studied Acharya Chandrakirti's text, our teacher would say, remember, we learned about bodhicitta in terms of this development. Well, let's go back. Remember? Yeah, so that's why I've added this here to the explanation, so that you're familiar with these different types of awakening mind. So the first type of awakening mind that you develop at the very beginning, so uncontrived bodhicitta, when you develop uncontrived bodhicitta, it's called the awakening mind of imaginative engagement. Imaginative engagement. Refers to bodhicitta on the earliest stages of the bodhisattva path of accumulation and preparation. Imaginative. Why imaginative? Well, I guess you imagine you really experience emptiness. You're just conceptually realizing emptiness. You haven't experienced emptiness yet. So although your mind wishing to become enlightened is spontaneous, it's driven by great compassion, all that, but it's not really conjoined yet with that direct experience of emptiness. So there's still stronger self-centeredness as opposed to a bodhisattva on the first ground, yes. Okay, so that's called imaginative, the awakening mind of imaginative engagement. And then the second is the awakening mind of pure altruistic intention. That's when it's pure. Your altruistic intention has become pure through your direct realization of emptiness. This mind endures from the first to the 7th ground. First to 7th ground is of pure altruistic intention. Why? Because you realize emptiness directly. So, but what is it from the first to the 7th ground? Why up to the 7th ground? Because up to the 7th ground, you still have afflictions. You're not an arhat yet. So on the path of accumulation, path of preparation, you haven't realized emptiness directly yet. So it's a bodhicitta of imaginative engagement. Okay. From the path of seeing, that is the first ground onwards, you have achieved awakening of pure altruistic intention. It is pure, made pure by the direct realization of emptiness. Okay. But then that kind of mind remains with you up to the seventh ground. That's when the afflictions are still there. You still have ignorance, you still have anger, you still have, but of course, we say you still have anger, but I don't think they really throw a fit or something. I mean, when we say anger, that's important to understand. When people hear the word anger, they believe it's this kind of like you turn red, you know, you want to strike or something, but that's not what anger means, right? Anger can be just an annoyance, just a slight moment of annoyance, just a split second of like, and then it's gone. We have anger that may go on for hours, right? Or at least half an hour, or maybe 5 minutes. So if you have 5 minutes of anger, you have anger. If you have a second of anger, you have anger. Of course, it's a huge difference in terms of time, the term. So we can still say a bodhisattva may still have anger. For instance, even on the path of seeing, may still have like a moment of annoyance. Or even if anger no longer manifests, the potential for it to arise is still there. Attachment, definitely. Definitely attachment. Definitely attachment to the I. But it's so subtle. It's so weak. And it weakens further. However, as long as there's still ignorance, subtle ignorance, subtler, it's not as coarse, not as recognizable, you still have afflictions. And that goes on all the way up to the seventh ground. So there's a huge difference in terms of the strength of the afflictions, how frequently they arise, how long they're active, right? And it just pop up and go, pop up and go. A moment of inattentiveness there and it's gone. But it's still there. A second of affliction means there's still an affliction, strictly speaking. Yes?
These tiny little pop-ups.
These tiny little
anger,
pop-ups. Yeah.
Also destroy marriage.
Pardon?
They're
Oh, these tiny little pop-ups of anger, do they still destroy marriage? Yes, tiny amounts. But they keep replenishing the merit because of this credit, you know, the rest of the time, great compassion, great love. So they replenish it. In our case, we lose our merit by, you know, being angry for hours on end and then not replenish. We don't, you know, try to recreate merit again. That's why it's much more dangerous in our case, getting angry. Okay, but then the third type of awakening mind is the fully matured awakening mind, which arises on the most advanced stages of the Bodhisattva path from the 8th to the 10th ground. That is called fully matured because there are no afflictions, no self-centeredness, no self-grasping. Fully matured. It doesn't get any better in terms of awakening mind. Yes, please.
Krishna, this means also that inactive seeds are not there anymore, so there is no possibility for arising from the afflictions anymore?
Can you say that again? Sorry, I couldn't hear.
Is this means that the inactive seeds are not there anymore, so there is no possibility for
Yes,
arising?
exactly. Absolutely. From the 8th ground onwards, not only are the afflictions no longer in the continuum, there's no potential for them ever to rise again. So you already, when you're really advanced on the 7th ground, for instance, some bodhisattvas, or probably all bodhisattvas, they don't get angry any longer. That annoyance stops. I forget, there's a certain level, I believe, I don't remember exactly now what it says. But the point is, at some point, certain afflictions just no longer arise. But the potential for them to arise is still there, because there's still ignorance. But once the subtlest ignorance is gone, on the 8th ground, the seeds are gone. The potential is totally gone. Yes, absolutely. Yes, yes. Okay. Having said this, therefore, yes, that's called fully matured awakening mind. That's the fully matured awakening mind, which arises on the 8th to the 10th ground. And the 4th is the awakening mind of having eliminated the obstructions. That is in the continuum of a Buddha. So you see, you have these, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4 different types of bodhicitta. All the wish to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings, yes, but in terms of everything else that's going on in the mind, everything else is going on. So we should never see any mental event as isolated. Don't see any mental event as isolated. I think that's very important to understand, that any mind that arises in our continuum influences the other minds as well. Why is this important for us right now? Because if we have afflictions, for instance, pop up in our mind, even though the affliction is gone, they may still negatively influence our mind. How? For instance, I believe, for instance, when you have anger towards someone, you're really angry with someone, you hate someone, then when the anger goes away, I believe you feel more vulnerable. You feel your state of, like, the anger is gone, but there's a sense that others will also hate me, or others may not like me, right? I've talked to someone about this also with other, like, friends of mine and so forth. When you have a strong moment of hatred towards others, the hatred may be gone, so you no longer hate that person. I mean, at least it's not active in your continuum, but you kind of feel miserable afterwards. I mean, who feels good afterwards? And maybe also feel others may not like you, right? Sometimes we feel like, oh, others may not like me because a moment earlier I felt I didn't like them. Whereas if you really had that strong love and compassion for others, then you feel you're more likely to feel loved, even when that love is not active, feel loved by them. I don't know how to put it into words, but also when I have strong moments of hatred, then I feel miserable afterwards, even though the hatred or that anger is gone. And it almost feels like, oh, other people must dislike me. And when I catch this thought, I'm thinking, why would they? Just because I dislike them, but it makes you really vulnerable. These afflictions make us vulnerable. When there's a strong moment of attachment, the attachment may be gone, but fear may be there, right? You have a strong moment of attachment. Maybe someone is leaving you, or, like when you think of a moment when you had that strong, oh my God, and then the attachment is gone, but there's fear. So it leaves something. That is important to understand, that they linger they don't linger in the sense that they're still there, but they leave behind a bad taste. Therefore, it's so important to look out for these afflictions. At times they may be there and we're not aware of them. That's number one. But even though we're aware of them, once they're gone, they leave something behind. And feeling miserable may lead to a next moment of anger. Right? It gives rise, so in that moment you had anger, and anger is gone, and you may feel others look at you in a funny way, for instance, but they don't. However, that may give rise to more anger. Oh, look how they look at me, and or in the case of attachment, there's attachment, then that gives rise to fear. Attachment is gone, but because there's fear, new attachment arises. So these states of mind, when you feel kind of miserable, they again trigger new afflictions. On the other hand, here you see the opposite. It's the same psychology, but here the opposite is more stressed. When you have, for instance, bodhicitta, when you have the mind that wishes to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings, together with wisdom, so the mind of bodhicitta may no longer be there, but if you then meditate on emptiness, it's much easier. It's much easier. This is not just true for a bodhisattva, but I remember we discussed this once on the debate ground. Our debates were very much like analytical meditation, except the emotional stuff that had to happen more at home. I mean, there were emotions, but there wasn't really the kind of privacy to have these emotions and to really internalize them. But the repetition helped us to internalize ideas. That was really helpful. I remember one time I debated with one of my classmates. His name is Matur Rinpoche. He's from the Kagyu tradition. Taglong Kagyu, I think it's called Taglong Kagyu. Anyway, he's still around. He's got a monastery in Nepal, and he was very good in his studies. And we sometimes debated. And I remember we debated a lot about compassion at that time. Compassion. And so we all were so immersed in compassion, thinking about compassion all the time, and also tried to put it into practice just because of the circumstances and everything. And I remember, because our teacher taught about it all the time, and it was so much present, so putting it more into practice than usual, it felt like the sense of there's no self was less scary, for lack of a better word. So I had no understanding at all. But just that sense, the I, it wasn't as scary. Okay, there's no self, no big deal, because your focus is always, is more on others in that particular situation, even though it was only very short. It was only due to the circumstances, not due to my effort. But the point is, it came up in the debate. I remember asking Matteo Rinpoche, I said, why is it when you focus more on others and so forth, that it seems less scary? I was in the beginning at that time, and I had no idea why. And he said, because you realize the chair is empty. The chair on which we believe we're sitting, the I is sitting, has been empty right from the beginning. Because when you focus on others, it's almost like you get up and you're there for others. So that imaginative I that you believe is there kind of seems to be like getting up and working for others. But then, since you've been getting up, the sense of I was the I that's sitting on that chair the whole time. But then you look around, it's not there, it's never been there, nothing has ever gotten up. And then it's much easier to realize it hasn't been there in the first place. Am I making sense? He really just said, because you realize the chair has always been empty. So it feels more like you've gotten up to help others, but then there's nothing that's gotten up, there's nothing that ever sat there, and it's much easier to let go. Whereas if we very self-centered, always I, you never get the sense the chair is empty. The chair becomes fuller and fuller. In fact, there's only that chair with that thing on it. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah, and that way it becomes also better to understand. Just a sec. So once we do these meditations on love and compassion and the awakening mind and so forth, then you leave it aside and meditate on emptiness. It's much easier. It's much easier in that moment. That's why as Honus oftentimes speak about meditating on both. They support each other, right? So they're not therefore taught in isolation. Here you've got the four types of bodhicitta, but why are they called imaginative? Why are they called pure altruistic, fully matured and so forth? Simply because of the understanding of emptiness. Yes. Neve, you wanted to say something?
I'm just trying to always trying to wrap my head around you're more mindful, so you're more aware, but you're also less self-conscious, it seems.
You're more mindful, so you're more aware, but you're also less self-conscious. Huh? I would have thought you're more self-conscious. What are you aware of, though? Depends on what you're aware of.
I guess so.
If you're just aware of the bird, yeah, maybe you forget about yourself.
Yeah.
Right? So mindfulness. Mindfulness, actually, the English word mindfulness means 3 mental states in Tibetan. It refers to 3 mental states in Tibetan. I don't know in the other tradition, but mindfulness in this tradition involves self-reflection, introspection. Introspection, that is considered to be most important when it comes to mindfulness. Of course, they also say when you take a shower, become aware of the sensation and so forth, but that's an introspection. It doesn't really say, look at the bird and be totally absorbed in the bird. Sometimes you could do that, why not? If it's too much, just myself and so forth, it feels overwhelming, let's just watch the bird, that's fine. But actually, ideally, mindfulness is a package of 3 types of minds. Attentiveness, well, maybe I mentioned introspection. What am I thinking? What am I thinking? What are my thoughts? Constantly checking back. Of course, you can't focus on just that, because if you hold a conversation, You can't just, you'll miss what the other person is saying. So you need to pay attention to what the person is saying, but switch back and forth. Like, okay, what am I thinking? How are my thoughts? Am I getting envious? Am I getting envious of what the person is saying? Do I develop aggressiveness? Do I have attachment? Or do I sincerely listen with care and understanding? Do I put myself into the other person's shoes or not? So the first point is, in particular with interactions with others, that's when our practice really comes to the fore, in that it becomes important. Because when we're alone, we're just with ourselves, we can be so compassionate because there's no one around who annoys us, right? Therefore, when we're with others, that's the test. So in that moment, of course, in our room, we should do the same thing again and again. What are my thoughts? How many afflictions? Are afflictions running? Right? Are they active right now? And then try to apply the antidotes. But the point is, first is introspection, attentiveness, and remembrance. Introspection, attentiveness or vigilance, and remembrance. So remembrance, the Tibetan word remembrance, is usually translated as mindfulness. But it actually just means recollect, remember. And it's three states of mind. So this is based on a teaching His Holiness gave once. His Holiness the Dalai Lama once talked about this, and it was written down in his Secular Ethics. In the book Secular Ethics, you'll find a beautiful explanation on that there are three types of mind. One is Sheshin, Payu, and Temba. Those are the three Tibetan words. Sheshin, Payu, and Temba. So Temba means recollection, Sheshin means introspection, and Payu means vigilance or attentiveness. So real mindfulness means, what am I thinking? What is going on in my mind? Again and again, check again and again. That is the safest way. That's the very beginning. Check again and again with vigilance, with attentiveness, and remember, because we forget to check. So to remind yourself again and again, which thought did I have? And that we need to develop more and more. So if very self-conscious, the first step is to become very conscious of your own mind. Get to know your own mind. We learn about Lorik. It's almost like we're looking at a different mind. That's how we learn Lorik, and that's okay. Initially, that's how you do it. But then what you learn theoretically, you try to recognize in your own continuum, right? You try to recognize the same thing in your own continuum. And so it goes beyond that. Become aware of these different minds you learned about, but also learn to distinguish them in your own continuum, as in like, oh, now it's a negative one. That's the one I need to pay attention. Apply the antidote. Antidote. Don't let it run wild. Right? And then if you can, generate positive states of mind, love and compassion. Fake it, keep doing it. There is no break, there's no vacation from that. Unfortunately, that's the one thing we can take no convocation from. But through familiarity, it gets easier. And it's so rewarding. It's not like contempt, because it makes us miserable. Our afflictions make us miserable. All our fear, our depression, they come from these moments of, right? And they, of course, when we feel depressed, we're more likely to have attachment and anger. And that increases that. Yeah, it's really to look out for our afflictions and try our best. And the first step is really to become aware of them, because a lot of it goes unconscious. It's subconscious. It's subconscious. Because we don't have these three. The package of mindfulness, in other words, self-introspection. Yeah. That's the very beginning. So in answer to Neve's question, when she says mindfulness means you're a lot more conscious. And you learn to control your own mind. That is the best control in the world. Because that's the one thing that's out of control. Right? The one thing that's out of control. The world is not out of control. It feels out of control because our mind is out of control. And as Shantideva says, you don't try to change the world. You try to change your mind. You cover it with leather and so forth. I mean, that's just another way of saying, a changed reality. What's happening is still happening, but our feeling upset about it and being depressed about it and all that, that is not coming from the outside. That is our conscious, subconscious reaction. And we suffer so much mentally. That mental suffering we need to control in the beginning, right? We learn how to control it. And so then through this, you're not so much dependent on other things. You need a lot less stuff. I mean, because you find a lot more happiness inside, and that really brings you forward, right? It's a lot less dependence on external things. Yeah. Anyway, all right. Having said all this, sorry, I'm talking so much about other things. Regarding the second quotation from the liberating story of Maitreya Sutra, in particular the words, the powerful wings of his generation of awakening mind, aspiring for the omniscient state, a power eclipsing, that I already cited that before, right? I'm no longer really understanding my own commentary in here. Something is weird here. It's okay. So here I've added some scholars. Maybe I should have left those scholars out. Maybe it's just too confusing. Some scholars interpret the awakening mind here as the conventional bodhicitta on the first ground, and the pure altruistic intention as the awakening mind of pure altruistic intention. All right, yeah, I came across and I do listen to some of the recordings of classes in Tibetan, and I go through my old notes of my own classes that I received, and that came up repeatedly. So I thought I want to give you the same impression. I remember now that I added this because it was mentioned so often. So there's some commentators who kind of draw this distinction, and other commentators reject this view because they say conventional bodhicitta on the first ground is the awakening mind of pure altruistic intention. So why distinguish between awakening mind and altruistic intention? It doesn't make any sense. Any distinction would be redundant. Moreover, as mentioned above, although the metaphors in the two quotations differ, their meaning is the same. And because the first quotation explicitly mentions great compassion, the second should be understood in the same way. Therefore, these commentators explain, this last bit is what's confusing me. It's confusing me as well. When I wrote this, okay, I need to highlight it and look at it again and maybe rewrite this. I'm confused myself here because it's been a while since I put this together. Anyway, forget the last bit. Okay. Yeah, this bit really confused me too. But everything else before, I hope it's clear with the 4 types of bodhicitta, etc. If this is so, the text continues, one might ask, do you deny that the conventional awakening mind of a bodhisattva on the ordinary stage outshines Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas? So all this discussion we had saying that according to verse 8, hearers and solitary realizers are surpassed by bodhisattvas on that ground simply because of their conventional bodhicitta. Right? That's the main thing. So we do talk about the awakened, the ultimate bodhicitta. Yes, that's why they, on that ground, they achieve direct realization of emptiness. Okay, but why do we say these bodhisattvas surpass hearers and solitary realizers? Because of their bodhicitta. So then, what about previous to that? On the path of preparation and the path of accumulation, they had bodhicitta, so they must have surpassed them there as well. And so, therefore, someone is arguing, if you're saying this is the case, do you deny that the conventional awakening mind of a bodhisattva on the ordinary stage surpasses hearers and solitary realizers? I'm not saying that, he's saying. So someone might ask Acharya Chandrakirti and Lama Tsongkhapa in this context whether by stating that bodhisattvas on the first ground surpass hearers and solitary realizers, they're implying that the conventional awakening mind, there's a little C, I think I unintentionally deleted that the conventional awakening mind, do you have a little C there? Yeah, that was a typo, I only noticed later on. So they're implying that the conventional awakening mind of bodhisattvas on the ordinary stages do not surpass hearers and solitary realizers. But Lama Tsongkhapa replies, this is not what is meant. Bodhisattvas on the ordinary levels of the path of accumulation and preparation do, of course, surpass heroes and solitary realizers on account of their conventional bodhicitta and their bodhisattva lineage. The point rather is to emphasize that bodhisattvas on the first round and above surpass heroes and solitary realizers through conventional bodhicitta insofar as it sustains and accompanies their direct realization of emptiness. Right? So it's not denying the other, but it's saying the focus is not on that. Okay. Because in that sutra, it also says the following, because it goes on to say, bodhicitta, even on the beginning level, is amazing. So here they speak about like a broken piece of diamond. It's like a tiny piece of, not broken as in like focusing on the fact that it's broken, but even a tiny piece of diamond is still very precious. So even though bodhicitta on that level is very weak in comparison to having realized emptiness directly, then it becomes much stronger through the realization of emptiness, but it can be compared to like a little diamond is still a diamond, right? Still has incredible value. So child of the lineage, it is like that. It is like this. Even a broken piece of diamond, the most precious stone, still outshines or surpasses all the amazing ornaments of gold. It does not lose the title, the king of all precious stones. Apparently, that's what it was called in India, the king of all precious stones. And it can totally relieve poverty. Likewise, O child of the lineage, the diamond that is the mind generated for the omniscient state, though it may lack power, still outshines all the golden ornaments that are the qualities of Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas. He who possesses this does not lose the title of Bodhisattva, and such a mind overcomes all the indigence of cyclic existence. Indigence. Don't even know what that means. What is indigence? Is that even a word? Indigence?
Hardships.
Hardships. Oh, all the indigence, all the hardships of cyclic existence. Okay, great. Thank you. To underscore this reply, so the explanation is Lama Tsongkhapa cites another passage from the same sutra, this time using the metaphor of a diamond. So even a chipped diamond or even just a small piece still surpasses gold in value. It does not lose its status. So in the same way, the conventional awakening mind or bodhicitta of ordinary bodhisattvas, even not as strong, still surpasses the impressive quality. So it's really just repeating that. So from the moment this mind is generated, practitioners are rightly called bodhisattvas. And even in its early stage, it already has the capacity to help overcome, oh, here it is, the hardships of cyclic existence. Yes, I did at some point probably look it up. Okay, all right. So the hardships of cyclic existence. Then it goes on to say, in the compendium of training. Who composed the compendium of training?
Shantideva.
Yes?
Shantideva.
Shantideva, very good. Acharya Shantideva. The above sutra is cited to substantiate the point that one should not disparage an awakening mind that is divorced from the bodhisattva deeds, and that it's impossible for someone who has attained the bodhisattva grounds to have an awakening mind divorced from the deeds. Okay, again, Lama Tsongkhapa is now talking about something else when it comes to bodhicitta. That's so beautiful. In a way, it seems like he's going all over the place. But he introduces us to other ideas to give us a fuller understanding. And as I said before, when we studied this text, we've already studied Maitreya's text and are familiar with these ideas. So it's a great reminder. Bodhicitta comes back in, although there's a lot about the direct realization of emptiness, but it still teaches us a lot more. So this is kind of the teaching style. It can be a little bit overwhelming when you study the traditional texts. It's like it has one main focus, but it brings in a lot of other stuff to again and again remind us. Okay, so the great Bodhisattva Shantideva's Compendium of Training cites this latest sutra passage to make 2 points. Okay, so the latest sutra passage was this passage that we just went through. First, it emphasizes that we should not belittle or dismiss bodhicitta that is not yet accompanied by the bodhisattva activities such as generosity, patience, and so forth. This is known as aspirational bodhicitta. This form of conventional awakening mind arises in the continuum of a bodhisattva who has not yet taken the bodhisattva vow. Have you heard of the difference? Aspirational bodhicitta and engaging bodhicitta. No, very, very important idea. Previously, we distinguished between bodhicitta on the path of accumulation and preparation, then path of seeing up to the 7th ground, then 8th and 10th ground, and in the continuum of a Buddha. But there's another way. And usually when you learn about bodhicitta, this is one of the first things you learn. You learn about bodhicitta, first is called aspirational bodhicitta, and then engaging bodhicitta. Now, as the word aspirational seems to suggest, you just aspire to have bodhicitta, but that's not what it means. Aspirational bodhicitta does not mean you want to generate. That's oftentimes how aspirational bodhicitta is understood. When you just hear it, aspirational bodhicitta, if I ask, do you know what it means? A lot of people say, oh, it probably means you aspire to generate bodhicitta. That's not what it means. Aspirational bodhicitta is actual bodhicitta. So, let's say first you had verbally derived bodhicitta, right? As we have right now. And then you strengthen it and you familiarize more with it and you grow stronger and stronger, and it's now no longer verbally derived, but still uncontrived. Okay, still needs an effort. You need to make an effort. And then for the first time, you have the spontaneous mind of enlightenment. It comes from your heart. It's spontaneous and it continues to be spontaneous again and again, and now totally influences all your actions. That is called aspirational bodhicitta. That is called aspirational bodhicitta. It's called aspirational bodhicitta. Hi. It's called aspirational bodhicitta because you haven't taken the bodhisattva vow yet. All right, that leads us to a question. I've taken the bodhisattva vow, but I don't have bodhicitta yet. Do you have the bodhisattva vow? Strictly speaking, no. No. And strictly speaking, it's good to take the bodhisattva vow, and there are different assertions on that. But honestly, what is one of the bodhisattva vows? Of the many different vows, one is, I do not give up bodhicitta. You can't give something up that you don't have yet. Right? That's kind of the logic. If I don't have the wish to become a mechanic, and someone tells me, don't give up the wish to become a mechanic, but I don't have that wish, it doesn't make any sense. Right? So similarly, actually, strictly speaking, you can only receive the bodhisattva. You can take the bodhisattva vow before generating the aspiration to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. That is, before you have that spontaneous mind. Right? Remember, just having verbally derived bodhicitta, as we talked a lot about verbally derived bodhicitta, that mind, you also have the wish to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings, but it's more just repeating the words in your mind. But here it's like you feel it from the depth of your being, and it's now spontaneous, and it informs all your actions. It influences all your actions. That is aspirational bodhicitta. That is real bodhicitta. Only now can you take the vow, because there's something to give up, which is actual bodhicitta. But they say it's aspirational based on Acharya Shantideva's the Bodhisattva way of life. Bodhisattva's way of life, yeah. Does anyone know why? There's a quote in that text. He distinguishes between aspirational bodhicitta and engaging bodhicitta. He says it's like the wish to go and actually going. The wish to go is the wish to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. That's aspirational bodhicitta, the wish to go. But when you take the vow, now you've promised. You will dedicate, you will keep particular vows that are part of the bodhisattva vow. Particular vows, you're keeping particular vows, so you made that commitment. It was not just the wish, you've now made that commitment. Now you're actually engaging in the deeds of a bodhisattva. Now your aspirational bodhicitta it's like, of course, previously we're also practicing generosity and so forth, but they say kind of it's not really conjoined with bodhicitta yet, because you haven't made, it was just the inspiration. You didn't engage in it because you didn't make that commitment yet. It's like when people live together because they love each other and they want to live together up till, until the end of time, but they haven't taken the marriage vow yet. They're not married yet, right? Only once you've taken the marriage vow, for instance, in Christianity, you talk about, in Judaism, I guess also the marriage vow. Do you talk about vows? Yeah. So you've marriage vows. So only from that moment onwards, everything you do is the action of a married couple, for lack of a better example, actually, because just you happen to have vows. But, before you get married, ideally, you know each other, you want to be together, you want to be ideal. Yeah, there are certain cases where people don't want to be with each other. But there's first the wish to be together, spend the rest of your life together, and then you take a vow to do so. Right? Here it's the same. You want to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. You want to become a Buddha, but then you take the vow. You actually make the commitment, which psychologically is very, very powerful. Very powerful. That's why they say just refraining from killing doesn't hold the same virtue. It's not as virtuous, it's extremely virtuous, but it's even better to take the vow, to take that commitment. Psychologically, it's more powerful, and therefore the virtue is stronger. Taking a vow. Even if you don't take a formal vow, if you make a promise, I will not, from now on, I will not kill. The virtue of that is much stronger because the strength of that determination strengthens that virtue. Does that make sense? Yeah. So they say, if you can't take the vow, at least generate that determination in your mind, right? There's a famous story of the time of the Buddha, of this butcher who killed throughout the day. That was his livelihood. That was what he had to do on a daily basis. So he approached the Buddha and he said, I can't just give up being a butcher. My family, I have to support them. I can't just leave them behind. This is how I'm making money. And he was desperate because he was, accumulating a lot of virtue throughout the day. And the Buddha suggested to take the vow not to kill throughout the night. Okay, throughout the day, okay, but still accumulate great virtue. He was asleep at that time anyway. But still, that's what he did, took that vow to. And similarly, if there's certain things we may not be able to refrain from, the idea would therefore be to then generate that kind of promise. It would not be a vow because you can't really take a vow just for a night, but generate it in the sense of like, throughout this night, I will not kill anyone or will not do such and such. That is said to be very powerful. And we also take the Mahayana precept, for instance. We take them just for a day because, we feel like we can't take them any longer. And that is also a great preparation, of course, very powerful. So just to familiarize, again, we talked a lot about familiarizing ourselves. And so in that context, again, you have like a vow where you just take it through for 24 hours. Okay. Anyway, having said all this, so aspirational bodhicitta is therefore a type of bodhicitta where you haven't taken the vow yet, where you're not really engaging in the bodhisattva deeds yet, right? So you could argue, well, they're deeds, they're from a bodhisattva, so there must be bodhisattva deeds, but yeah, well, in the strictest sense, you're not. Because you're, as it says here, wait, where do we go? Oh, so we should not belittle the patience. Known as aspirational bodhicitta, this form of conventional awakening mind arises in the continuum of a bodhisattva who has not yet taken the bodhisattva vow. So even if you've taken the bodhisattva vow before you generated bodhicitta, you don't have it in your continuum. So you can take it, but you don't get it. But still take it, it's amazing. I'm not saying don't take the bodhisattva vow, but be aware you haven't received the vows in such a way that you would receive them when you have already bodhicitta. The thing is, usually when His Holiness, for instance, gives the bodhisattva vow, what does he do? He inspires us to generate bodhicitta. So that's already, although it's just contrived or even just verbally derived, if you like, nonetheless, it's the best we can do in this moment. And so there's still an incredible positive effect on our mind. So it's not like, well, you didn't get the vow, you wasted your time. Not at all. This is so powerful. Taking the Bodhisattva vow, even if for just 5 minutes in your life, for the very first time you generate a bodhicitta, just for the occasion, like you've never generated bodhicitta before, but you do it in the presence of His Holiness. They say the virtue is so unbelievable. Therefore, still do it. It's incredible. But be aware, don't have bodhicitta, so I can't give up that, I can't break that one vow, one of the most important vows. Do not give up bodhicitta. Okay. It can be defined as an awakening mind that is not directly sustained by the applied activities of conduct that is not included in the training of that vow. That's a literal translation from the Tibetan, and I know it sounds incomprehensive, but it's an awakening mind that is not directly sustained by the applied activities of conduct that is not included in the training of that vow. So in other words, once you have the vows, any activity is directly sustained by the vow. Does that make sense? Because the vow is always there. The vow is always in your continuum. In other words, when you take the vow, so you have the awakening mind, you've taken the vow is now part of your mind. Now, any kind of activity is included in the training of that vow. Any kind of activity, once you take the vow. But if you have aspiration of bodhicitta, it is not directly sustained by any activity that is included in the training of that vow. Maybe I kind of made a mistake. An awakening mind that is not directly sustained by the applied, maybe there's a not too much. An awakening mind that is directly conjoined with the applied activities of conduct that is included. Yep, there's one not too much. That's why I was myself a little confused. I think the second not is wrong. Wait, let me then read it again. Just cross it out to be sure. It can be defined as an awakening mind that is not directly sustained by the applied activities of conduct that is not directly sustained by the applied activities of conduct that is included in the training of that vow. Yep.
This is about aspirational bodhisattva vow.
Pardon?
Like this is describing aspirational bodhisattva vow.
Yes, that is the definition of aspirational bodhicitta. Aspirational bodhicitta. So an awakening mind that is not directly sustained. In other words, at the time of that awakening mind, in the continuum of that person, there's no activity of conduct that is included in the training of the vow. To formulate it differently, an awakening mind that is not in the continuum of someone whose activities are part of the bodhisattva vow. Does that make more sense? I think maybe reformulate that again. If I reformulate it again, then you don't get too caught up on this sentence that doesn't seem to make sense. I try to say it differently. Once you have the bodhisattva vow, the vow is always in your continuum. Because in the Prasangika school, vows are form. Vows are form. And once something physical. In the other schools, they don't assert that. But in the Prasangika school, vows are of a physical nature. And once you have taken the vow, it's not a type of mind that's sometimes there and sometimes not. That's what the other schools would say. When you take the vows, any kind of vows, there must be a mental consciousness that wants to keep the vows. Only then is the vow active, they say. It lies dormant at other times, but that's enough for you to be a nun, for instance, or a bodhisattva. In the Prasangika school, they say, no, it's more than that. It's not just a consciousness that is sometimes there or not. It's a physical phenomenon. Don't ask me what it looks like.
Physical phenomenon without directional parts.
Pardon? Yes. How?
Is physical phenomena without directional parts?
Without directional part. It does have directional parts. Well, I would say, honestly, this is my theory in this because it's really difficult. First of all, in the Prasangika school, everything has parts. Everything has parts. There's nothing partless. This is in the lower schools. Everything that exists must have parts. Okay?
That question still holds. Like
Yeah.
if it's a
Yeah.
physical form, it should have space, like volume. It should be in this part, not in that part.
Right. Okay. So here it becomes very difficult, and I have my own theory on this because it's also a form that goes on from one life to the next. Right? The Bodhisattva vow. What's the difference between the Pratimoksha vow or the Pratimoksha vows and the Bodhisattva vow? The different types of Pratimoksha vows. For instance, as a novice, I have 36 vows. What's the difference between these vows and if I had the Bodhisattva vow, my continuum, or the different vows that are part of the Bodhisattva vow? I'm using the singular on purpose. I put it in here in a footnote, never mind now on the details, but there are certain vows that make up the Bodhisattva vow. So what's the difference? Yes, Tome.
Pratimoksha vows are until death, and until this life I will work for liberation.
Exactly.
Tantric vows
Yeah.
until enlightenment.
So as Tome said, the Pratimoksha vow, as a Getsul, for instance, as a lay person, if you can take 5 vows as a lay person, you only take them until the end of this life. And then when you die, the vow's gone. Because you made that promise for this life. And then since you didn't take it beyond this life, the vow's gone when you die. However, the Bodhisattva vow is taken, and the Tantric vow, he mentioned the Tantric vow as well. The Tantric vow is taken up to enlightenment. The Bodhisattva vow is taken all the way up to enlightenment, as well as the Tantric vow, both of them. So it means they continue from one life to the next. Okay, as long as you're not enlightened. Now, since it goes from one life to the next, the question is how? Which form do you take? Which physical phenomenon goes from one life to the next? Can you think of any?
Yeah, will be this not the mind imprint?
The imprints?
Form.
The imprints are not form. The imprints are not physical. The mind continues from one life to the next. Is there anything physical that continues from one life to the next? Anything? Pardon?
Subtle wind.
The subtle energy wind. The subtle energy wind, that continues from one life to the next, right? I don't know, is everyone familiar with the subtle energy? I think you've all heard about that, right? The subtle energy in our body. For instance, in Chinese medicine, what is it called? Qi? Qi, right? Or in Tibetan medicine, excuse me, Tibetan medicine. How does the Tibetan doctor, when they take your pulse? Yeah, lung. It's called lung in Tibetan, exactly, lung. Not lung. Lung means quote, lung. Kind of high-pitched. You would know, you're learning Tibetan. So, therefore, they measure the different energy winds of your organs, for instance, since it's all interconnected. That is called the energy wind. So that energy wind, a very subtle one, continues with a very subtle mind when we pass away. Just a very subtle, our mind grows subtler and subtler and subtler, and then it leaves the body to then be reborn in the next life with the subtle energy. So the only place the vow would be it's a subtle energy that continues on to the next life. That's the only way the only answer I would have. And it has parts in the sense that it occupies space in that it's not everywhere, that energy. The energy, when I die, the subtle energy that continues, and part of that energy would probably be the Bodhisattva vow. If I had it, it occupies certain space, so it's not partless. Right? Yes, please.
Is there a difference to the transmigratory collection?
Is there a difference to the transitory collection? It's part of the aggregates. Which aggregate? The transitory collection. What is the transitory collection? What does that mean? What is it when we talk about a transitory collection? What is that collection?
Everything was passing from one life to the next.
Yeah, but what does the transitory collection mean? Collection means more than one.
Afflictions and seeds.
Transitory collection is another word for saying impermanent aggregates. The impermanent aggregates.
Empowerment.
Impermanent.
Impermanent.
Transitory means impermanent.
Yes.
Collection means the collection of mind and body, or 5 aggregates. So the psychophysical collection. Therefore, in the sutra text, they don't talk about energy. They don't talk about subtle energy going from one life to the next. And in the sutric text, therefore, they have a very hard time to explain how vows can be formed. There's nothing that is carried on. They only talk about the mind going from one life to the next. But in the tantric system, there it is explained more thoroughly, and it's okay. This tantric explanation is seen as the final explanation. The sutra falls short. The sutric explanation, the non-tantric explanation, in this case falls short of explaining how vows can be formed. Okay, so having established their... Pardon?
So which aggregate would be?
Which aggregate would subtle form be? Which aggregate would the subtle energy be? Form. I just gave it away. I said form, yeah. Yeah, so which aggregate, exactly. There would be 5 aggregates traveling from one life to the next, the subtle energy wind, together with a vow. Right? So with this energy, it's kind of like, it seems like a spacey or new agey way of saying, oh, there's just this energy. But of course, when you study more about at least this idea in Tantra about the winds and so forth, it's not just some kind of made up thing. There's really some kind of energy, and especially when you study Chinese medicine or Tibetan medicine, for instance. Okay, having said all this, now it's clear that this type of energy remains with us unless we break the vow, or the sub-vows of the vow. Okay, let me just say, why do we say Bodhisattva vow and not vows? It's the same for novice. I say I have the novice vow, although I have 36 vows, but I can't say I have 36 novice vows. Why can't I say that? Very simple reason. I have 36 novice vows, and I have 4 root vows. If I break any of them, I know I'm no longer a novice nun. The remaining 32 vows are like a fence, like a protection of these 4 root vows. So one of them, let me give you one example, is I cannot kill a human being intentionally. If I were to kill a human being intentionally, I would disrobe. Okay, one is of course being celibate. That's another vow. But let's talk about, yes, killing a human being. Now let's say I have 36 vows and I kill a human being. Do I still have 35 vows left? I do. I do still have 35 vows left because I haven't broken them, but I'm no longer a novice nun. So then I still have Getsul vows because I have 35 of them. Well, that doesn't matter because I have 35 vows only, and therefore I no longer have the Getsul vow. Similarly, with the Bodhisattva vow, I have the 14 root vows, I believe, and the 18, I forget now, 48 secondary, and I think 18 or 14 root vows. I always get them wrong with the...
18.
Pardon?
18.
18 root vows, oh yeah. 18 root vows and 48 secondary vows. If I were to give up bodhicitta, which is one of the root vows, do not give up bodhicitta, I will still be left with the 17 of the other, 17. So do I still have the bodhisattva vow? Yeah, I have 17 vows. No, that's why you don't use the plural. You just say you don't have the bodhisattva vow because you don't have all the vows that make up the bodhisattva vow. That's the reason why you use singular. Mm-hmm.
And Dishima, how can we give up bodhicitta?
How can we give a bodhicitta? Oh, easy. Well, easy only in the beginning. Only in the beginning they say it's easy. But in the text they explain in the very beginning, it's easy, you can easily give up bodhicitta, but once you reach the next level on the path of accumulation and you attain what is called gold-like bodhicitta, you will never give it up. But in the beginning, it is quite weak, and all you need to meet is an annoying person, an obnoxious person. Right? So they give this example in the text a lot, you know, like you meet a person and they're like so obnoxious, and you're like, ugh, for that person, I don't want to become a Buddha. That's all sentient beings -1, gone. Right? What is bodhicitta? The wish to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. -1, gone. Yeah, so only one person that annoys you the bits, and and for that person, they're out. So you lose bodhicitta. It just needs one obnoxious person. All right. Okay. Anyway, therefore, now when you have the awakened mind, every activity you engage in is now included in the training of that vow. It's included in that training of that vow in the sense that it's now directly sustained. The vow is always there. And through the force of that vow, it is enhanced, that activity. Does that make sense? Okay. So although divorced from the bodhisattva activities, aspirational bodhicitta nonetheless carries immense value and is worthy of respect. So even though it's just aspirational bodhicitta in the beginning, because first you generate bodhicitta and then you take the vow. Second, the compendium of training emphasizes that for practitioners who have reached the bodhisattva grounds, their awakening mind cannot exist apart from the bodhisattva activities. At that stage, the awakening mind and the bodhisattva activities are inseparably united. Once you're on the bodhisattva, you see, this is, here compendium of training is saying, once you've reached the first ground, you have engaging bodhicitta. Because you take engaging bodhicitta, or you generate engaging bodhicitta at the very beginning. So, therefore it says, the great Bodhisattva Shantideva is not only underscoring the greatness of bodhicitta in the continuum of ordinary bodhisattvas on the path of accumulation and preparation in general, but also highlighting its first generated on the path of accumulation. Before it is joined with the 18 root and 46 secondary precepts of the Bodhisattva vow. As explained before, last year I explained this, the 3 levels of the path of accumulation, small, middling, and great, aspirational bodhicitta is said to exist only on the first. So when you have the path of accumulation, we did this as part of the handout. In the very beginning, I described the different paths, just a brief kind of introduction to path and grounds. So you find it page 30 or 40. In there, you have 3 levels of the path of accumulation, right? You're on the path of accumulation of a bodhisattva. And that has 3 levels, small, middling, and great. Aspirational bodhicitta is said to exist only on the first. Because by the middling level, bodhisattvas will have taken the bodhisattva vow. No way you don't have the vow. Someone will give you the vow. At which point, aspirational bodhicitta becomes engaging bodhicitta. So once you're on the middling level of the path of accumulation, you have no longer aspirational bodhicitta, you have now engaging bodhicitta. Therefore, on the first ground, you have engaging bodhicitta anyway. Right?
What is the difference? Like with what Shantideva said about once you're in the first ground, is there a difference between a bodhisattva who has engaging bodhisattva vow in the second level of accumulation and the bodhisattva in the first round in terms of how the actions are infused by bodhicitta?
It's stronger. It's stronger. Bodhicitta is much stronger.
And the quote you gave from the compendium training, did it say something about the difference between the first round and bodhicitta?
Not in this, not in this context. Whether somewhere else, I'm not sure. But just from the context, it becomes clear what we went through in the beginning. Just a few paragraphs before. Maitreya, for instance, the Reverend Maitreya, in one of his texts, Compendium of Sutras, he says bodhicitta on the path of accumulation and path of preparation is bodhicitta of imaginative engagement. Bodhicitta on the 1st to the 7th ground is bodhicitta of the pure altruistic intention. Bodhicitta on the 8th until the 10th ground is fully mature bodhicitta, and bodhicitta in the continuum of a Buddha is the one free from all the obscurations. So that shows there's a difference, and the difference can only be in strength. So it's the aspiration to become fully enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings, but it grows stronger, doesn't it? It grows stronger every time a bodhisattva continues to meditate on bodhicitta. And it is not just through familiarity that it grows stronger, but also through the understanding of emptiness. So here it becomes clear, for instance, on the path of accumulation and path of preparation, bodhicitta is not conjoined yet with the direct realization of emptiness. Then, the next level, from the 1st to the 7th, it is conjoined with the direct realization of emptiness, but the afflictions are still there. So it's not fully mature yet. It's pretty pure because of the direct realization. And then from the 8th ground onwards, it's even stronger, not just through familiarity, not just through the direct realization of emptiness that influences it, but also because there are no longer any self-grasping, self-centeredness, all gone. And then the strongest is the one in the continuum of a Buddha, everything gone. Does that make sense? So there's different reasons for why it is stronger. But the first reason would be familiarity, grows ever stronger. And then the other reasons are the ones just given. Yeah. So it's so beautiful because, as I said before, nothing is seen in isolation. We explain certain things in isolation, but it's important to understand that other states of mind also enhance bodhicitta in this case. All right. Okay. Oops. We're done. I don't want to go for too long. But yeah, we didn't cover this much. I'm not that happy with my own. I think I made some mistakes. There's this one passage, you remember? I got confused with the last bit of that passage. And definitely the kind of explanation I just gave is wrong. Maybe just let's finish this particular explanation and then we're done for today. As explained before, the 3 levels of the path of accumulation. I did already read that. So from the middling level onwards, aspiration of bodhicitta becomes engaging bodhicitta. Yet since the bodhisattva vow can be taken any time after the initial generation of bodhicitta, engaging bodhicitta may also be found on the small path of accumulation. So you can already develop engaging bodhicitta on the small path of accumulation because you can take the bodhisattva vow a minute after you've become a bodhisattva. So then for a minute you have aspiration of bodhicitta, and a moment later you take the vow and you have engaging bodhicitta. But if you don't do it while you're on the small path of accumulation, at the latest you have done it at the end of the small path of accumulation, and once you reach the middling path, you have engaging bodhicitta. Okay. This can be defined as an awakening mind that is directly conjoined with the applied activities of conduct that is included in the training of the bodhisattva vow. Yeah, so there's previously the not should go in the beginning, an awakening mind that is not directly conjoined and so forth. That would be aspirational bodhicitta, and here's engaged bodhicitta, or engaging bodhicitta. Great, so we're done with this bit. All right, so we covered today, we went all the way up to 128, 129, and we did 5 pages, right? Yes. 129, 130, 131, 134. I can't count. 25, 26, 27 last time, 28, 29, 30, 31. 4 pages. We're a little faster now. Okay, great. Okay, thank you very much. Let me please summarize. Let me just briefly summarize. Sorry, I don't want you to go without having summarized. Okay, just quickly, what we discussed today, we went back to the sutras. There was Acharya Jayananda's kind of assertion. What is bodhicitta meant here? He introduced to us the idea of verbally derived bodhicitta, which is really the very first time we generate the mind of enlightenment based on just the words. Secondly, from there, Lama Tsongkhapa refuted that, but instead said, Here it's talking about the awakening mind of the pure altruistic attitude, or pure altruistic intention, which is bodhicitta on the first ground. So we learned about the 4 different types of bodhicitta in terms of strength. And then lastly, there was this debate. So when you're saying bodhisattvas outshine or surpass heroes and solitary realizers because of their conventional bodhicitta on the first ground, are you saying they don't surpass heroes and solitary realizers on the path of accumulation and path of preparation? And Dhammatsangapa says, that's not what I'm saying. They do that also the moment bodhicitta has been generated. And as Shantideva tells us, even aspirational bodhicitta is so amazing, even without having taken the vow. So the moment you generate bodhicitta, you surpass a hero or solitary realizer simply because of that great aspiration. That's it. Done. Okay. So maybe because we've really stretched it, let's not do the prayers. Let's just think for a moment. Make sure we dedicate whatever virtue we have accumulated. Forgot to say something. Okay, never mind. Whatever virtue we've accumulated, so that it may become a cause for all of us to attain the fully enlightened state of a Buddha. For the benefit of all sentient beings. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Yeah, I forgot to answer someone's question, Bernd's question. I'll do it next time.